504 years ago when Luther nailed his theses to the door of the Wittenberg Church. And he had a lot of things to say. You can read many of them on the windows over there. But I think, Pastor Gary, as I think about what from history we want to pull forward today, what message from the Reformation we want to stick our claim to me, I think what's most important is all the work that Luther wrote about God's grace and how that is foremost and most important, just how essential God's grace is to our life of faith as a church.
You know, I know that was Luther's main point because he was coming at a time when people had forgotten that. But I almost take it back to Jeremiah as he comes and reminds the people in one of those exile situations that they had broken the covenant that they had with God. And one of those covenants was following the law. And in a way, what I think gets lost in the Reformation sometime are how important our works still are. So often we want to toss it all to grace completely, but there are times that we have to remember what we do really matters. So I think at the Reformation, we ought to talk about works a little bit more than we do.
Okay, you still haven't convinced me. I'm still on the grace side of things, and so it really is a good model, though, that one of the other things the Reformation brought us was debate and dialogue in the church. So it seems like this is what we need to do here this morning, Pastor Gary. Let's have a debate. Grace or works? You're the lead pastor, so I'll let you take the lead.
All right, well, probably because I have the easiest one, too. Because works are so evident. You can tell when you do something. Your works are tangible. Other people can see them in you. They're also controllable. I can be in charge of what I do, and I don't have to turn it over to what somebody else might do. Works are also experiential. I get to be in them as an active person, and therefore I think that our works become a really vital part of who we are.
I'm really glad I let you go first, because I feel like you've made my point for me just in the way you described all that. Because grace is so important because it's beyond our control. There come situations in our life where it's completely out of our power to carry on, to move forward. We face a situation where it seems completely hopeless, and then God's grace picks us up and gives us a chance to move forward. If it's just up to me, I'm going to mess up again and again and again. And that's why I love grace so much, is it's just this promise that I've been given, that I don't have to earn, that I don't have to work for, that I can't even fully understand. And yet that in itself is a gift, something beyond my imagination even. That's what God's grace and love and forgiveness is for us.
All right, you're close to convincing me, but I need to remind you that even Jesus said that he wasn't here to abolish the law. And Jesus, we would have to admit, was a pretty grace-filled person. Okay. But even in the law, Jesus said that he came to fulfill the law, that nothing of the law should pass away. And so that should be a part of what we understand. Most of what we do is going to be governed by the law, not governed by grace.
Okay, I see what you're saying there. And yes, Jesus did say he came to fulfill the law, but that's Jesus. Jesus can fulfill the law because he's God incarnate. Jesus is the one that we trust in to bring us grace and forgiveness again and again. I think, too, about when Jesus encountered people who were not keeping the law, and his response was graciousness. I think about the woman who was caught in adultery. And so by letter of the law, she was supposed to be stoned. There were people waiting to do that. And Jesus comes along and he doesn't say, well, by the letter of the law, I guess you're out of luck. He forgives her. He transforms her life and gives her a new possibility and way forward. And that's what grace does for us. That's what Jesus does for us, is he gives us a chance and helps us find a way forward when the law would leave us completely hopeless.
All right, I get that point. And I think what happens then is we find out that the law no longer works for us, but sometimes we end up just battling it because we become enslaved to it. I mean, doing good works becomes more important to us than anything else. And I think that's what Paul was getting at when he wrote to the church in Rome, is that through law, we understand maybe what we are to do, but we become so caught up in that we always think about the next thing we have to do, the next law we have to fulfill, and everything that comes to it. And as much as we think we want to get freed by the law, and instead we end up getting enslaved to the law, and it seems like there's no way out.
And what Jesus says, though, is that he will make us free indeed. That there is freedom to be found in following him. And so I hear a little bit of what you're saying about how works really are important. But it does come back to that freedom that Jesus gives us. And there's a lot written out there by different theologians and scholars about this idea of cheap grace, which I think is what you're really arguing against here. This idea that if we can just sit back and do whatever we want because God will cover it all for us anyways. And when I think about Jesus bringing us freedom, that doesn't seem to be the point. He frees us in order for us to then serve others, to care for others, to move into a new way of life. Like that woman who was caught in adultery, he forgives her so that she can move forward. So where does this leave us, Pastor Gary? Are we kind of both saying the same thing here?
We might be. I like the idea of Jesus giving us a way forward. I'm just not ready to give up on what I do. So maybe if I talk about it this way, if I do something and it becomes really tangible, there's a certain amount of satisfaction that comes from that. So say it's fall. You probably have a neighbor who has a lot of leaves in their lawn and may not be the kind of person that can get out and be constantly raking their lawn and taking care of all of the leaves. And so if I go over and I take care of Edith's lawn, and I rake all those leaves up, and I bag them up, and I carry it away, even if she never knows I did it. You know the experience of cleaning a lawn of leaves and looking back on it, and that sense of satisfaction, because it's so tangible. I see some people nodding. You're with me. You're a works person. I got you. So you're cleaning that lawn off, and you understand, you look at it, and you go, oh, it just lets you know that you did something, right?
Yeah, okay. And so it wouldn't be a Reformation sermon if we didn't quote Martin Luther in some way, shape, or form. And so I'm hearing you talk about this, and I'm reminded, Martin Luther said, God doesn't need your good works, but your neighbor does. Yeah. And I think that's a powerful place to kind of combine these 2 points together here. For me, it comes back to order of operation. Do you remember that in elementary school math class? Any elementary school math teachers out there or students? You have to do it in the correct order or you'll get the wrong answer. You have to solve for the numbers in the parentheses before you multiply it, otherwise you'll be all out of whack. And I think it's the same way with grace and works. Grace always has to come first. It is about what God does for us. We don't work our way up to God. God always comes down to love us and to forgive us and to be with us. But then, as a result of experiencing God's grace, we're compelled to serve our neighbor. We can't help but be transformed by this freely given love of God to then go out and care for those who are in need. The way that I like to talk about it is that good works are what salvation looks like. Let me say that again. Good works are what salvation looks like. When you experience the grace and the salvation of God in your heart, you can't help but then go out and respond to that good work with service to your neighbor.
In the same way we're going to be doing right after worship in the fellowship hall.
Absolutely.
Bagging up food for Metro Caring so that people can have something. So maybe it's a way of thinking about the order, like you say, of things. Maybe it's because of God's grace that I love going and raking up that lawn of leaves, even if it's not mine, and seeing what that works like, and realizing that when I do that, there's a certain sense of accomplishment, satisfaction that comes through. But you know, as you're talking, I realize after that, when you walk away, there's something else that comes within you. Something that's beyond now that you've seen a lawn that's clean, but you feel different in your spirit. You feel as if something might have even stirred in your soul, and it's not as tangible as you thought it might be. So maybe it's thinking about it this way. I cannot be enslaved to works. That is, I cannot work my way into heaven. But maybe, by the grace of God, heaven can work its way into me. And maybe that's the reform I need.
Maybe that's the reform we've been talking about all along.
Amen. We invite you to join in singing the hymn of the day. It'll appear on